Hello friends, and welcome to this video about textures. So yesterday I got a question on Discord asking about the settings options for the textures. Now I took a quick look at this and I realised I'd not really looked into textures for a very long time. And they don't work as obviously as you think they might do, so I thought I'd make this quick video to show you what I learned yesterday. So what's textures in OpenToonz? Well, they're images that you can use for drawing lines or for filling areas in vector and Toonz raster levels. But they work slightly different in both of them. So let's take a quick look. So we'll start with the vector level. And now you can see textures is shown in the palette area in the second tab. So the simple way to use them is if I just draw a quick rectangle area here, add a new colour palette entry and then just choose a texture, I can then fill that in. And straight away we've got brickwork. But the question that came in was, how come the settings for that texture don't work? And very simply, they don't work on vector levels. So you can't scale it, rotate it, or change the displacement or contrast. And the question that came through was, how do I make this brickwork smaller in one area compared to another? So there's a couple of ways to do this on a vector level. One is using the effects, which I won't go through today because it's a little bit complicated. But the other way is to use the animate tool and reduce the size of the column. So if you want to show different brickwork sizes, you need to have a different column. So I'll create a vector level on that column, and again I'll draw a rectangle, I'll add a new palette entry, and I'll fill it with the same brickwork texture. So if you choose the animate tool and then change the size, I can make it smaller like that, and then with the selection tool I can actually make the area that's being filled larger again, but the brickwork remains small. And it's a bit fiddly, you have to have different columns, so it's not ideal. But the best way is to use the Toonz raster levels. So if I just hide those a second and create a new Toonz raster level, and again I'll draw a rectangle, I'll add a new palette entry, and I'll fill this with that brick texture, and then I'll fill it in. And straight away you notice something peculiar. It looks like the texture hasn't been filled, but in reality it has. It just requires preview mode to be on. So if you click the eye at the top right here, and you can see the brick texture. But now it's in preview mode on a Toonz raster level. You can also use these settings. And I won't go through all of them today. You can take a look at the documentation to find out what they all do, and I'll add a link to that down below in the description. But a couple of things you can do is you can adjust the scale to make the brickwork smaller or larger. You can change the rotation within the same area, and you can change the displacement and contrast. Now brickwork is a great example of a texture you might want to use, but just to point out a few others, you've got the chessboard there, and you've got some paper settings which are great just to give you a textured background. And once you've got the textured background, you can use the effects to add a colour change to it to make it appear like a different kind of material. So here's a few more, but do take a look at them all. And finally, you might want to add your own textures. So how can you do that? Well, there's two ways, and if you're going to use the texture for different projects over and over again, you want to add it into this list as a permanent texture to be available. And you do that by adding the image into the textures folder inside the library in OpenToonz stuff. So just create the image file, which can be a BMP, PNG, etc., and drop it in here. And there's a couple of caveats to the size of the image, but it's fairly flexible. But again, the details of that are in the documentation that I'll link below. So if you drop your image into there, restart OpenToonz, you'll have your image available in the textures list. And the second way to add your own texture, if you create a new palette entry, is to use this button at the end here that looks like it's a ... texture, but it isn't, it's a custom texture, and it allows you to on the fly just create a new texture to use. So select that for your palette entry and then go to settings and then choose your file on disk from here. and fill it in there. And then you see the texture being used. And if you change your mind about which texture you want to use, you simply go back to the Textures tab, choose a different texture, and then press on the Custom Texture button again. And then when you go to Settings, the file name has been removed, and you can select on a new texture to use. And it'll use that. And if you want to change this from being a texture palette entry to a normal one, there's no remove texture option in the textures list. However, I've noticed if you go to the vector layer and then choose a vector type, and then this first button here removes a vector type and places that palette entry back to a standard colour palette entry. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of textures in OpenToonz. Do take a look at them, see if they're useful for you. One thing I have noticed though, if you use quite a few textures, it can slow down the system and make it difficult to work with, so be aware of that. But using textures for the background or for simple areas is really handy, so why not give it a go? So as I said, this question came through on Discord. If you've got any questions about OpenToonz, pop over to the OpenToonz Discord, the link's in the description, and hopefully one of us over there can give you a hand. So that's it for now, and do subscribe for more tips with OpenToonz, and ring that bell to be notified when I release a new video. So I'll see you soon for another video, and that's a Darren Tea.